Hello, welcome. This is Headlocks and Headphones. My name is Martin Anderson. Now, normally we do start the show with something that's a little bit more cheerful, but we're going to get the kind of bad news out of the way. For those that haven't been following wrestling the past few weeks, if you remember Shad Gaspard from the Ruthless Aggression era, he was in the tag team Crime Time. He ended up going for a swim with his son on a beach in Florida, and the riptide ended up taking him away and his son as well. And one of the sad things here is that one of the last things Shad Gaspard ever did was point out to the Coast Guard where his son was. So the last thing Shad Gaspard ever did was save his son's life. Now, you are here, of course, on Headlocks and Headphones, and we don't want to talk about the bad stuff all the time because when you talk about bad stuff all the time, it does make things negative. Now, we are here to kind of critique and evaluate the stuff that happens on wrestling shows, but what I do want to talk about, just whilst we're here, is one of the really cool things that's happened when it comes to Shad Gaspard. Now, a few years ago, 2016, Shad Gaspard is actually somebody who not only did he save his son's life as the last thing he ever did, he also went out of his way to break up an attempted robbery in 2016. So this is a guy who has only ever done good things in his life. He was a member of the Crime Time tag team with JTG. He also has a script for a TV show that he had written about 2 years ago that he ended up getting some interest in. Now, the rumours are Mick Foley and several other people have actually said that they're interested in getting involved and making sure that this pilot happens and getting things made. I'd be really interested to see if that show gets made. Now, joining me today is, of course, Zoe Styles. I do want to ask, Zoe, do you have any memories of Crime Time?
I kind of vaguely recall. I haven't watched any of them since I became a proper wrestling fan. But when I was about 12 years old, I used to have SmackDown vs. Raw on the PS2. And Crime Time were a playable team that you could do back then. I didn't know too much about wrestling at the time. I just kind of, liked the look of some guys, didn't like the look of others, some of the movesets and stuff. But to be honest, I never knew them individually. I wouldn't have known Shad Gaspard was Crime Time. JTG, on the other hand, I kind of do. But that's only because he's got a reputation in his own right.
Well, one of the quite interesting things I do want to talk about is I do kind of have a Crime Time story. Now, I do have several meeting wrestler stories here in Aberdeen, particularly when there's been shows around. I think I've told the Drew McIntyre story. I think I've told the Alberto Del Rio story. I think I've told several other stories as well, including the Lionheart one, which was in our bonus episode last week, which was actually one that seemed to kind of it changed the mood of the interview when I told the Lionheart story. Now, I do want to tell a funny story about Crime Time. Now, they were kind of playing that stereotypical black gangster character. Now, they weren't the character where they were criminals. They always came across as quite fun. And one of the quite interesting things was they used to do things like they would be ticket touts outside the venue, and they'd have tickets to sell to other wrestlers who couldn't make it into the building. It was intended to be funny. Now, a lot of people played the race card here. Crime Time thought it was hilarious. Obviously, since then, JTG's kind of mentioned some race issues in WWE. But I do want to not focus on that negative. I want to focus on something positive. Here in Aberdeen, Crime Time were involved in a match. And you know what? I can't remember the match. What I do remember is afterwards sitting outside with the person who I'd went to see the wrestling with. And me and him were sitting talking about the match we'd most enjoyed. And it was Crime Times. Because it was funny, it was entertaining. It wasn't meant to be taken seriously. So at this point, all the fans are lined up outside waiting for everybody to jump on the bus. So we head over as we see people coming over, and there's a few guys jump on the bus, and I believe John Cena was injured, so he just kind of hobbled on the bus. And Crime Time actually came over, and they were signing a few autographs for people. And the guy who was standing directly in front of me took off his Converse trainers and threw them at Crime Time. And obviously security are pissed, and they're like, who threw them? And Shad Gaspard picked them up and was like, man, just don't worry about it. He took his Sharpie, he signed it, and he threw it in the opposite direction from the person who'd actually thrown the trainer. JTG grabbed the other one, having seen what Shad Gaspard had done, signed that shoe, and then went and threw it over in the same direction. So somebody went to the show thinking that they were going to get their shoes signed by Crime Time. And yeah, they did get signed by Crime Time, but 2 other people went home with them. I just thought that's one of those really funny things that, okay, he isn't with us anymore, but here's a guy who could appreciate the fun in wrestling and was even trying to get a wrestling show made now that he wasn't involved in the business anymore.
I certainly think if you go to anywhere in any situation and take your shoes off, you're going to have to expect to lose them. It's just one of those things, but certainly that's a fantastic story. I think that's quite a lot of fun.
So this week it did come out. Remember the firings that happened a few weeks ago? There was like 7,000 people fired from WWE, and everybody lost their shit because everybody lost their jobs. Do you remember that story?
I'm pretty sure there was like a list or something, and it just kept getting updated. You know, they kept Vikings, but fired the wife. They kept another tag team, but then fired the partner for that. It was just didn't make sense.
So some news has been coming out about that, and one of the things that's quite interesting is on release day. Now, traditionally, release day used to come round about WrestleMania season, right afterwards. WWE would sack a handful of wrestlers. Now, before this batch, the last time that happened, Drew McIntyre was on that list. So it was quite interesting that this time the list included guys who'd been featured heavily on TV, like Rusev, Anderson and Gallows. It also featured, Kurt Hawkins, Zack Ryder, No Way Jose. There is a story that came out this week about how these guys got fired, and I think you're maybe going to have a bit of a laugh. There is a joke, I think it was Kurt Hawkins told it in a shoot interview, which basically is, as soon as you hear that somebody got fired, you turn your phone off or you just leave the house so they can't get a hold of you. WWE appear to have listened to that shoot interview, and they found a way around this. Right? So WWE have always had a point of, they don't release you by telling the internet you've been released. They have to tell you first. So Zack Ryder, Rusev, and No Way Jose have mentioned that they were fired by text message. So Rusev put up on his social media that he found out he was fired via text message, and within a few minutes, Zack Ryder and No Way Jose both replied with, you too then.
That's really harsh, I think. Certainly for a professional company, if it's not cool to break up with your partner over text, it's not cool to fire an employee over text. There's got to be some standards.
Well, I just think it's one of those it's a very weak thing to do, to fire somebody via text message. But I do think if we're going to look at guys like Rusev, Ryder, and No Way Jose, they get paid for 90 days. It's not like Drew Gulak, who basically wrestled on Friday against Daniel Bryan and then woke up Saturday morning and he was no longer under contract. I think it's a massive thing for WWE that they've always wanted to see over the past few years, that they weren't going to just sack lots of people. I think the coronavirus has been a good excuse for them to let people go that probably should have been let go a long time ago. I think Zack Ryder, No Way Jose, several other people on that list should have been let go a long time ago.
Well, a lot of them we haven't actually seen on TV. And really, by rule of thumb, if you don't see somebody on TV for a month, you just presume they've been let go anyway. And I agree. I think that this is a good time to drop some dead weight. Not to say that these guys aren't talented and won't go on to do well elsewhere. But if your talents aren't being used, why are you being paid?
Perfect. Right, I'm going to stop the recording. So if you remember last week, there was the announcement that Becky Lynch was pregnant, and what was quite funny was everybody's kind of had their own say on this, and somebody that we both like had what can only be called a controversial stance. Wow, I made that fucked up. Right, we'll go again. So last week, it was announced by Becky Lynch live on Raw that she was pregnant, she was taking time off to go and be a mum, and who could be angry about that? Nobody. Apparently somebody didn't take it entirely properly, and the comments they made were not exactly the best comments you can make to somebody who's away to become a mother. The comments were, for those who don't know, why on earth would somebody make the choice to have a baby when they're the main event of the show? The person who said that, I said it a lot worse than that. The person who said that was Jim Cornette. Now, I'm going to be controversial here, as you know I sometimes like to be. Honestly, I agree with Jim Cornette. When you're the main event, why would you give that up to go and have a child? Now, in saying that, there are rumors that Becky has had some issues in having children in the past. So I'm sure she's absolutely made up that she is going to be a mother and she has a partner she can trust and they love each other and all the things that people want to have when they have a child. But she also wanted to have a long career. And I think it's a huge step for her to make, to give up potentially millions of dollars to have a child.
I certainly think that the money would have been there, but really at this stage in Becky's career, it could be the good thing for her to take some time off. She started out Becky 2 belts. She then moved on to main event in WrestleMania and doing all these things. You know, she had the man gimmick that kept her going for quite a while. But realistically, it's gone on long enough that she was starting to burn out for some people. Not everybody, I love Becky, I'm a Becky fan, but I certainly think if I don't see her for, a year or so, that as soon as she comes back, she's going to get even bigger hype than had she just stayed the whole way.
Now, this brings me to, for me, a great quote that hasn't been used yet by anybody, but this is also by Jim Cornette. How can I miss you if you won't go away? And I think in some ways, this could give her the chance to come back and have a run at the other end, where she's still going to be Becky Lynch. She's still going to be capable of all the things she was capable of, but she's also going to have the longevity, the maturity that's going to come from being a mother.
Certainly, I think when you look at it, you've seen a number of superstars who've come back after being a mom. The Bellas did it. You had the Mickie James did it. Beth Phoenix. They've all been able to rise to higher heights in a modern era with that more mature outlook. Because let's face it, kids add 10 years onto any kind of age. And I think this is wonders for Becky.
This is the thing, right? Now, I know it's quite controversial to say, why would you give up millions of dollars? I think the answer is quite clear, because sometimes money is not the most important thing. And I think, although it's controversial to say, you have to ask that question. Why would you give up millions of dollars? Well, you would give up the millions of dollars because you want to have a family. And I think that, for some people, is more important.
I certainly think that I would be, as someone in that position, listening to the person who was brave enough to say that. You've got tons of people saying congratulations on that, that's fantastic. But really what you need is people saying what they think so that you can evaluate your situation properly. If you feel that's the best move that's been made for you, then fantastic. But sometimes you do just need that one person to say that one thing that makes you reevaluate what's happening around you, even if you don't change your mind.
So right now, we, of course, are going to talk about Monday Night Raw. We have, for the past couple of weeks, had the Street Profits and the Viking Raiders doing kind of anything you can do, I can do better. Last week was basketball, which was quite interesting. This week was axe throwing, which was it was just weird. There was obviously a Viking ceremony taking place, and they had Street Profits go along, and they made the mistake of trying to throw the axe to the target, kind of like what Ant and Dec did on Saturday Night's Takeaway. And instead of getting it on the target, they hit the barrel full of alcohol. And the Vikings were very pissed at that, as you could expect. A throwaway segment as far as I'm concerned, but it's a great way for us to see the Street Profits and Viking Raiders every week on air without us having to see them wrestle all the time. Because you know what? Viking Raiders are impressive, but who the hell are they? Street Profits, they have so much charisma. Let's see them as people. Let's see them as real people. And okay, they're characters that are turned up, but I think the Street Profits and Viking Raiders stuff is very, very good.
I think it's really funny to watch. I'm not entirely sure, to be honest, why Bianca Belair's there. Maybe I missed that segment where they actually explained why she's in with them. they definitely need somebody there to kind of balance the bromance that they have going on. I think those segments are hilarious. The fact that they were basically hustled by the Viking Raiders during the basketball thing really just made my ribs tickle.
And I think that's the thing that people forget. Sometimes wrestling can be entertaining. It can be funny. Haha is frowned upon by a lot of people, and I don't think it should be. Haha is something that we can look forward to. Now, some of the other stuff that happened on Raw, and we're not going to do a full rundown of Raw, purely because we've spoken so much on the rest of the show, but Natalya versus Shayna Baszler saw Shayna Baszler win with submission quite well. It was a convincing win for Shayna Baszler. But what I took away from that at the end, you had Natalya getting quite angry. She was kicking the ring ropes, and they were trying to set up the ring for the Kevin Owens show. And what we actually had was Natalya basically throw the chairs and the set out of the ring because she was so mad. Now, Kevin Owens came down and apologized for the ring being a bit of a mess when he was doing his interviews. But for me, we're getting to see a Natalya character change. And, okay, the cat lady thing's been quite funny for a while. I'm intrigued to see where heel Natalya can go, if that's what they plan on doing.
I didn't like heel Natalya with the cat lady thing, because what they did was they had babyface Natalya, then they had heel Natalya, who was just a bit of a piece of work, and then they had heel Natalya, who was just that bit crazy with the cat thing, and she was hissing at folk and scratching folk, and it was just surreal. Like, she's too young and too good to be pinholed in that kind of gimmick. I really hope they don't go back there. It's fine for her to be angry at something and take it out on people and want to show that she is better than that. But at the same time, if you're going to reduce her to something that is just so simple and ridiculous, again, humor can be funny, but you have to be careful about the way you use it.
Absolutely agree. Now, something that wasn't funny was the eye injury that happened to Rey Mysterio after he mysteriously managed to survive getting thrown off the side of the WWE headquarters. I'm not going to go into that one, obviously. But anyway, Seth Rollins came out. We thought he was maybe going to apologize because of the conflict he had last week, but instead what we got was basically that Rey Mysterio helped him to see the light and to know where he needs to go. Now, Akam and Razor are no longer part of this group. What we did see, of course, was the addition of a brand new member to the Messiah's group, which was Austin Theory, somebody who I think is great. And despite his small size, I think in a couple of years' time, he's going to be up there with Seth Rollins and a few other people as a big star in WWE. Very, very capable guy, somebody who can do no wrong as far as I'm concerned. He just needs time to develop. So that's not what I want to talk about, because the addition of Austin Theory is a great addition to that group. What was interesting was when Austin Theory ran in and started beating up the person that he did on Raw, it became clear that he was now part of the Messiah's group. But instead of joy on Seth and Buddy Murphy, we have to take away the Buddy, but instead of seeing joy on both faces, you saw joy on Seth Rollins' face for having a new member. But what you saw was almost, I don't have a brother or sister, but it's kind of what I imagine you would see when the older sibling sees the young sibling getting lots of attention. There's that jealousy, but you're trying not to show it. And that was what Murphy was putting across on Raw. Storytelling that you're not getting in other companies. I personally love that segment. I think the one drawback for me, and this is something that people are probably going to disagree with, I think Seth Rollins is not the correct person for that gimmick.
I certainly think, as a child of 5, and I am the oldest, that the sibling thing rings pretty true. You can love your siblings as much as you possibly can, but when you want to talk about something, about your day, about something that's happened in the last hour, and then suddenly somebody new is here and all eyes are on them, it can be just heartbreaking because you think, well, what about me? I think that's the same with Murphy. I think that's the same with Murphy, where Seth has given him some dedicated attention and helped him grow and helped him develop. And it's almost as if to say, right, that's me done with you. I've got somebody new to teach, to turn into the ways. Now, the way parents get around this is by using the older sibling to help the younger one grow. And that could be something that we see with Austin Theory, where we see Murphy and Theory in tag matches. And you see Murphy trying to help Theory along, show him like what style they want to use. But it can also go one of two ways. Theory can fall straight in line and kind of, praise them the same way Orton did with the Four Horsemen. Or
with Evolution, you mean?
Evolution, yes. Just the four people. It's all confusing.
In there, it's almost the same thing. Yeah. Yeah, but I'm very intrigued by this storyline because obviously not having a sibling, but having studied psychology to a degree and understanding kind of where this story can go, I'm excited by the possibilities. Now, we did see Nia Jax attacking Kairi Sane. We have seen some interactions because Nia Jax crashed Asuka's championship celebrations. So I think Asuka versus Nia Jax is going to be a match heading into the next pay-per-view. But the last two things I do want to discuss from Raw is Edge accepting Randy Orton's challenge. A great way to open Raw. The delivery that Edge does now is very different to what he did before when he was the Rated R Superstar. He very much comes across as somebody who feels he has something to prove. And people are very excited by the idea, excited and wound up as well, by the idea that Randy Orton's thrown out the term a wrestling match because WWE is not wrestling anymore, it's sports entertainment. And, they had a gimmick match at WrestleMania that Edge won, and Randy Orton wants to prove he's the better wrestler. And this is the thing. Edge has been quite open and honest about the fact Randy Orton's probably the greatest in-ring wrestler ever. Shawn Michaels may have more charisma. Shawn Michaels may be more of a showstopper. Bret Hart may be a better technical wrestler. But in terms of the package, Randy Orton's probably one of the top 5 talkers of all time. He has delivered consistently for 17 years now. There isn't many people, I think, can argue that they're better than Randy Orton right
now. I think Randy Orton definitely, in terms of Edge, probably has something to prove. Because back when him and Edge would have been together, back when him and Edge had conflict, Orton wasn't the superstar that he is today. His mic skills, whilst natural, were probably not refined. His wrestling, he was still coming to terms with a lot of anger issues at that point, I believe. I certainly think being able to grow and basically prove to Edge, who would have taken him under his wing, I am better than you now. I am at least standing on the same platform. Let me prove it. Certainly in a world where sports entertainment is a big thing and it is all about the shows and the gimmicks, being the better wrestler is something that is highly coveted.
Now, the other thing that I do want to mention briefly is we saw the main event, Drew McIntyre versus King Corbin, which is what we expected from two big guys. But we did establish who Drew McIntyre's next opponent is going to be, and that is Bobby Lashley. A lot of people not excited by that, but this is a feud that actually rolls over from Impact Wrestling, where Drew McIntyre and Bobby Lashley actually did fight over their world championship. And the last match between the two in Impact saw Bobby Lashley retain the Impact World Championship. So for me, it's very believable Bobby Lashley could win that championship.
I think Bobby has a lot of skill. I think that he is a wrestler who can carry and direct a match. And I am looking forward to seeing where this goes. I hope that Drew doesn't lose, because the fact that he has so far, I believe, been undefeated is a very good thing. He's a Scottish king, essentially. And you don't want to see your king lose.
Especially as Scottish people. We're rooting for him. And he's a Rangers fan, which probably shouldn't make us vote for him more. So that was Raw. And now what I want to do is I want to quickly talk about some NXT, because I think NXT, for me, despite the ratings in America not showing this, I think it's the better of the shows between AEW and NXT. They opened with the absolutely amazing entrance for Karrion Kross, which has the bird flying towards the shadowy figure. And then, obviously, I think it's quite cheesy when Scarlett Bordeaux starts kind of singing along to what's being presented. But I'm a big fan of the Karrion Kross presentation. And the fact that Tommaso Ciampa came out and challenged him for a match at the In Your House pay-per-view in June. That's going to be a great match, and one certainly I'm hoping that Karrion Kross gets the win to kind of elevate that character. Tommaso Ciampa losing a match isn't going to hurt him at all. What do you think, having watched the Karrion Kross presentation for the first time today?
I was actually quite entertained by it. I didn't see Scarlett Bordeaux's stuff as cheesy. I actually thought it was quite impressive that she had clearly learned the lyrics enough to be able to mouth it along with the timing. I mean, doing that live can be quite difficult, even walking. But the fact that she was climbing onto the ring, she was moving, she was entertaining.
There's a lot of moving parts there. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think that's one of the things for me is Karrion Kross is somebody who I think is a future world champion. He needs to develop. There's some room for improvement there, but there's potential. Now, Rhea Ripley returned after being out for a little while, and she faced off against Io Shirai. That match was kind of brought to an end with Charlotte coming out and spearing Rhea Ripley. So that is going to lead into Rhea Ripley versus Charlotte, rematch from WrestleMania at the In Your House pay-per-view, which should be quite interesting. I do want to mention quite quickly, how do you feel about the fact that the smoke stayed in the ring for the Karrion Kross entrance? Because that's something WWE have been quite big about, trying to fix aesthetic things like that. I think it was deliberate leaving the smoke in there. I really like that look.
With the colour tone that came with the entire entrance, it made sense to have the smoke there, because it was almost as though they were still opening the show. You know, it wasn't quite finished. The production values weren't quite there. Karrion Kross just came out and took the show over, and mid-setup went, right, that's me, let's go. That's what the smoke said to me.
I think that's one of the things WWE really are going to have to start doing, is just making the shows less formulaic. And I think a 3-hour Raw is making it really difficult to do that. Now, the Candice LeRae and Johnny Gargano segment, where they were basically bullying Mia Yim, and it resulted in Keith Lee having to come out and put a challenge down for Johnny Gargano. What do you think of this heel turn for Candice and Johnny Gargano? Because for me, I'm going to say something controversial here. I was listening to this, not watching it. I thought Johnny Gargano was Disco Inferno, because he sounds like Disco Inferno if you can't see him. And that's not a good thing.
I was really entertained by it, because it's basically how I imagine me and you would be if we happened to have a feud with somebody, where I would, well, I suppose in our relationship it would be you who'd be talking constantly, and I'm kind of just repeating what you're saying on the outside as though I've got something important to say. But in fact,
I'm truly shocked that you think I talk a lot. Truly.
Talk too much.
Indeed. Okay, so one of the things that's quite interesting is, so they fired Drake Maverick as part of that group of wrestlers that got fired, but he was in the interim cruiserweight title tournament. He's won his matches. He won on NXT. He's been placed in a triple threat match next week to decide who goes on to the pay-per-view to win the belt. For me, I think it would be a great redemption story if Drake Maverick was booked to win this tournament, got the belt, and then re-signed with WWE. The passion he showed when they fired him. For me, if I was your boss, I'm hiring you back, because I can see you want to be there. You want to work your ass off. The Drake Maverick video that he put up, even Grado and several others were saying, that's who we see every day. That's the Drake Maverick that we see. There's a guy who, when he signed with WWE, he was like, okay, now I'm here. What do you need me to do? And I think Drake Maverick is somebody that, if I'm setting up a company and I want to hire a wrestler, he's the first name on the list.
I love Drake Maverick. I think that all of his segments, whilst perhaps on the funny side, again, have been done so cleverly, if that's a word, that you kind of get behind him even if you think he's a bit of a joke. when he was running with the Australian chicks that I can't remember the name of at the moment.
Iconics.
The Iconics.
Yes.
They were good together. The chemistry was great. You know, they're chasing him around. Of course, you had R-Truth interrupt his wedding,
which I thought was hilarious. That 24/7 title stuff was great. Now, before we end.
So we open the show with the Inner Circle, who are always fun to watch. But to be honest, for me, with the group, there's no real storytelling. We see Hager dressed a little differently to remind us that he is the muscle of the group, and they hype their match against the Elite this weekend for Saturday. Brodie Lee comes out cutting a promo, and for a guy that has similar traits to Seth Rollins of WWE in terms of the gimmick, he does remind us he is not a god, but a man. The match with Ten and Jon Moxley had some decent chemistry there, and Ten hung with Moxley despite the fact that you would have thought he was maybe a mid-card guy. Of course, Moxley gets the win, and we see him trap Ten's arm in a chair and threaten to break it if he doesn't get his belt back. Brodie Lee claims that sacrifices have to be made for the greater good, and the title can be gotten back on Saturday. For me, the commentary let that match down. There was very little play-by-play, although I did like the fact that they outlined exactly what was coming up on the show. That, for me, is very helpful as a viewer. Moving to MJF versus Marco Stunt, where MJF is clearly the stronger competitor here, and then it wasn't too long a match, but you know what? There was some decent psychology. I like the fact that it is clear MJF is using brute force against Marco Stunt, and that armbar at the end where MJF got the win looked pretty brutal. Moving to my favourite part of the show, which was the Anderson Roberts segment, and there's hype for Cody versus Archer this weekend. Comments teasing a feud between Anderson and Roberts, and Jake even says, "I can go anytime." What let this segment down quite a lot were the comments from the audience, of course other wrestlers given the current situation, but there was a lot of shouting and a lot of other things that detracted from the feel of the segment. Jake of course calls Brandy a bimbo, and the ref stops the two of them getting a hold of each other, which is always fun to watch. Mike Tyson, we hear, returns to present the TNT Championship to the winner, Cody or Lance. And to be honest, for me, it's likely to be Cody. As he can't challenge for the AEW title, why not just create a title for him to make sure we remember he is in the main event picture? I really enjoyed Pac's promo. We finally get to see him call out Orange Cassidy, and he looks pretty in shape, which means I look forward to his in-ring return. Phoenix, of course, comes out and misses a head kick to Orange Cassidy. And the match continues, but to be honest, I do not understand this hype. What is so professional about a guy who walks around with his hands in his pockets? For me, there's so much more. Although he seems like a decent wrestler, there's more that can be done with that gimmick. And I don't understand how it can get over for a full-time professional wrestler. A spot in a 1-minute spot in a 20-minute match, I would have understood. And to be honest, I had the privilege of the live feed from the show, where between the ad breaks, the match slowed right down, pointless in and out ring spots, far too many covers to cover the fact that they didn't want to reveal the ending. And if you're a fan of Lance Storm's school, you know that's not the thing to do. Brutal DDTs were kicked out of way too easily, and because, it's called a finisher for a reason. It just doesn't make sense. After the match, Kip Sabian comes out and flips off Cassidy and Phoenix before a cluster of brawling spoils the end of the match. There were feuds lost in the shuffle. I would have been okay with some of the spots breaking away to establish some conflict, but why are we sat watching everybody just go into everybody else? I just don't get that. We move into Rosenbaker versus Shida and Stadler, and we hear JR in commentary say something that he probably wouldn't want to be heard on air. He mentions Nyla is 185 and he thinks that's a bit on the light side. For me, that's quite rude, perhaps even fat-shaming, and realistically, if you're good at wrestling, if you're good at any kind of sport, what does it matter what you weigh or how easy it is for you to do it? The interesting spot, yet again, during an ad break for this match was where Nyla Rose took Britt Baker by the throat. Baker clearly didn't want to tag in, and as we know from the character, any conflict that she faces she can avoid, so why not put that on TV? It demonstrates for me the sheer brute strength of Nyla, but it wasn't even mentioned on the commentary when the feed returned, and there was no picture-in-picture. We see the return of Shawn Spears, of course, afterwards. Interesting announcement that Dustin Rhodes is retired. I hope this is all story, although I did take issue with that cheap pill-popping comment. I sincerely hope that they got the thumbs up from that, from Dustin and the board backstage. And for me, realistically, there are just some things that shouldn't be broached by a professional on TV. It was realistically a lazy segment. We don't hear Dustin's response. We don't hear anything from backstage. And JR decides, do you know what, I'm just going to book it on the fly. I don't know if they have that power, but the graphic is there ready to go anyway for Double or Nothing. And they could have just had Dustin cut a short promo. They could have had Cody book it on behalf for, say, Dustin, here's your revenge. But they just don't do it. Our main event brings us Harley versus Guevara, where we were reminded that Sammy's ran over by a golf cart in the previous match. Though for me, there were vicious spots on both sides, so really Sammy's just got not that much to complain about. There's a dumb spot with some signs, no speaking, no fan interaction, and then tedious 5 or 6 pieces of card later, I'm sat wondering if he actually has any mic skills. Because if he did, why wouldn't they just let him speak? The match itself was quite interesting, there was some decent wrestling, but then again, during an ad break, they had Guevara throw Matt out of the ring and into a barrier. Why was this not on TV? Is it just me? Because there was no comment about it from JR or Excalibur either. They could have done a picture-in-picture again, they could have said, look what happened, this is what you missed during the ad break, but it just seems like filler for something that could have been done much better. Eventually, of course, Hardy gets the win, and then we move into Kenny Omega being held by the Inner Circle at the stadium. The Young Bucks make the save, Matt arrives on the scene, and then, of course, we see the return of Hangman Page in the same segment. For me, this week it's just been a show of lazy booking. They could have had Hangman come back earlier in the night to help Arn out. They could have had the Young Bucks during a tag segment to break everything up. They are the leaders of the tag division after all. But it seems as though AEW just want to remind you that they are chaos, and chaos is interesting. Why can't we have some proper wrestling, some proper storytelling, and some proper characters, where we don't need 6 or 7 additional people in a segment to remind us that we know how big this roster is? There are some very good wrestlers on that show, and they're rightly paid to be there. But I could have just read the results this week and saved myself 2 hours of my life. The greatest minds are behind AEW, 30 years of experience, but there is no consistent storytelling, and the talent just aren't being used effectively. For me at least, this is just my opinion. I do, however, look forward to seeing a Double or Nothing this weekend for AEW and find out how these stories pan out. Is there perhaps a title change? Tune in next week to see what happened. Thank you for sticking with me this long, and if you are a diehard AEW fan, get in touch with me. Let me know why I'm wrong. Headlocks and Headphones, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, let us know what you think. And if you want to be on the show, speak to my husband, he's always interested for a chat too. Let us know what you think, and have a good day, everybody. Under the current conditions, stay safe. Thank you. Hey everybody, Zoe Styles here for Headlocks and Headphones, bringing you the latest with AEW Dynamite for the 20th of May 2020. This is ahead of Saturday night's Double or Nothing pay-per-view, and this week the card looked pretty good. Although we only had 5 matches, there were some interesting segments in between, including Arn Anderson and Jake the Snake Roberts finally facing off, not in a match, but in an interview, where they hyped up Cody's match against Lance Archer this weekend. For those of you who haven't actually seen the show yet, I'm about to give the results away, so if you don't want to hear what happened just all in one go, skip ahead about 30 seconds and you can listen to my comments, criticisms, and just in general what I thought of the show. For the results, Jon Moxley defeated 10 of the Dark Order in his lead up to his match against Brodie Lee for the AEW Championship. Jon Moxley has been the champion for 88 days, but somehow not had the belt for about 2 weeks now, which is the central focus of this feud. MJF defeated Marco Stunt with a pretty mean looking armbar and celebrated in the most obnoxious fashion possible, as is what the gimmick is. We had Rey Fenix defeat Orange Cassidy before they both were destroyed by the rest of the tag team division. In our women's match, Nyla Rose and Dr. Britt Baker defeated Chris Statler and Hikaru Shida. This is to hype up the fact that Shida and Rose will be going against each other for the AEW Women's title this weekend. And of course, our main event, Matt Hardy defeated Sammy Guevara after Guevara wanted revenge for being run over with a golf cart. Quite exciting stuff.
So, hello, and I'm not going to do that because we're already going to be in the show, aren't we? So I'll do my bit later. So now that you've spoken about AEW and the Dynamite show from Wednesday, I just want to talk about the card that's coming up on Saturday night, Double or Nothing. For one of the first times, we're going to have a pay-per-view from AEW that I'm kind of interested in, and I think purely just so we can see what Mike Tyson's going to do. What are you thinking about this pay-per-view?
I'm actually quite excited about it. As I said on the show, we've got a lot to look forward to. I'm interested to see what Brodie Lee does, whether he actually gets the title that he's unfairly stolen. The casino ladder match, although, you know, it's not meant to be WWE, is going to be quite entertaining.
We're going to talk about all this in more detail. I don't want to give the game away right now, because that's one of the things that I think is quite interesting about Double or Nothing, is AEW are in some ways guilty of copying some of the things that WWE are doing. Do you not think it's a little bit strange that AEW would have a ladder match based pay-per-view right at the time where Money in the Bank's happened in WWE?
I think it's quite convenient, certainly. It could just be that time of the year where ladder matches seem appealing.
So it's ladder match season. Is that what you're saying? It's ladder match season right now.
That's exactly what I'm thinking. Maybe tables, ladders, and chairs. I know it's not December, but we had a lot of chairs in the show that we've just seen. So I think maybe ladders are just the next step.
Okay, so the empty TIAA Bank Field is where the show is going to take place. There'll be 3 title matches on the card. Jon Moxley defending his title against Dark Order leader Brodie Lee. Cody and Lance Archer competing to become the inaugural TNT champion. I was going to call him TNA champion. And Nyla Rose putting her women's championship up against Hikaru Shida in a match that will not have disqualifications or countouts. Let's look at the match card one by one. And we'll start at the bottom, because there is some stuff that's going to be happening on the pre-show, which is Private Party versus Best Friends. Private Party, very much a team that reminds me of the Street Profits.
I think you've got a point there, yeah. Private Party, I'm actually a little disappointed, weren't a big part of the show leading into this pay-per-view. They kind of had like a small scuffle with somebody and then everybody forgot they were there. It was mostly a focus between SCU and the Best Friends, which seems strange given that's not what the match is.
One of the things I want to ask is, do you think that WWE having teams that are very similar to AEW, do you think that's on purpose? Or do you think it just so happens that there is 2 teams out there that are doing fairly similar gimmicks?
I think it's maybe just a chance thing. I certainly wouldn't have thought that AEW would book someone as similar as the Street Profits the same time that the Street Profits are on. It could just be there are similarities with the characteristics. Of course, Street Profits being the superior of the two by quite a mile.
To be honest, I'm a very big fan of the Street Profits, and Private Party are certainly not a slouch in that respect. I think they are a very good team. They're facing the Best Friends. It's on the pre-show. As far as many are concerned, the pre-shows are usually quite throwaway matches. I think that'll be one that'll be quite exciting. There'll be quite a lot of spots in there. There won't be a lot of psychology, which is something that I look for in my matches, but I think it could be quite an entertaining match. But now we're looking at psychology, and that brings us to the next match in the card, Dustin Rhodes versus Shawn Spears. Now, earlier on, you told me something that kind of didn't sit well with you about the Dustin Rhodes-Shawn Spears match. So what do you think about the Dustin Rhodes-Shawn Spears match? Do you think it's going to be exciting, even if some of the things that have led up to it don't make sense?
Dustin Rhodes is a talent in himself. He can take the lead on any card and turn it into a main event. His psychology is up there with the best, considering the promo that he actually cut on his opening to AEW against Cody in that initial match. That promo was the entire reason I started watching AEW. I think Shawn Spears has a lot of work to be put into him. He needs somebody like a Dustin there to maybe take him to the next level. His promo, while it seemed a bit off the cuff, was a little bit shoddy, but that could have been a stylistic thing on purpose. Who's to know? Because creative don't seem to be a thing with AEW.
Well, I think they are. I think one of the problems is that sometimes maybe things are a little too creative. Certainly, I would be leaning towards Shawn Spears needs to get the win from that. That's where he's going to get the biggest momentum gain. Dustin doesn't need the momentum gain from that. Now, the next match we're going to look at, Dr. Britt Baker versus Chris Statlander. I know it's been a while since we spoke about AEW. Britt Baker has improved dramatically since that first promo we watched with Tony Schiavone. I think Dr. Britt Baker is somebody who is very talented. She also happens to be dating Adam Cole, which clearly she has somebody there to go pick the brains of. This is one of those matches, though, where I actually really do like the Chris Statlander gimmick. I like the story. I like the idea of an alien invading the shows. But you'd have to think the push is going for Britt Baker.
I think Statlander will actually get this one. Like you say, Britt Baker's come leaps and bounds since that first promo we watched. And quite like Dustin Rhodes, I don't think Britt Baker needs the win. It would be different if it was a title match and Britt had the title. Then I would have said, yes, absolutely, she retains. It's too early for Statlander. But because it's a non-title match, for me, especially after just seeing the women's match that just happened, Baker needs that win to make up for the fact that Nyla Rose was thrown full force into her chest.
So moving on to the next match, we have MJF versus Jungle Boy. Can't see past MJF. He's getting the character build. He's getting the in-ring build. And although Jungle Boy is somebody who the fans are clearly getting behind, MJF has to get this one, clearly.
Oh, I agree. I think that he's far too obnoxious to lose to somebody like Jungle Boy. Not that Jungle Boy is a bad talent. He's, again, come quite far from when he was first on screen. But he can walk away without any damage from losing to MJF.
Certainly, I think a guy his size can lose to future world champion MJF without damaging his career. Now, we move on to the Casino Ladder match, which gives you an AEW World Championship shot. Now, the competitors in this, Darby Allin, Colt Cabana, Orange Cassidy, Rey Fenix, Scorpio Sky, Kip Sabian, Frankie Kazarian, Luchasaurus, and a mystery competitor. The odds do look like it being somebody like a Drew Gulak, Zack Ryder, or something like that, maybe even a Rusev. It would plant him straight in and feud with Brodie Lee or Jon Moxley. More than likely, Rusev would come in as a babyface. So I would place him with Brodie Lee, and that would be another machine for Rusev. although obviously Rusev's not going to have the Rusev name, that's a WWE product, but I think Rusev's going to be the mystery competitor. I think he will be the one that goes on to win that. It makes the most sense. It's the easiest way to fast track him to the main event.
Certainly with the mystery competitor involved, you always think that they're going to get the win. Based on the names that we already know, I would have leaned toward Orange Cassidy. Now, I had a rant earlier in the show where the hands in the pockets thing, or the pockets in the hands as I referred to it on air, did not sit well with me. But I do think that he can go far with his character because his wrestling is good. He can connect with the audience and he could become a future title holder.
I think if somebody like Tommy Dreamer is willing to let you get your shit in, as the saying goes, then there's clearly a level of respect amongst the guys there where Orange Cassidy, he's at least trying something different. Now, I'm like you. I don't like all of it. I think it's overdone. But I think there is a little bit there. There's something there that's quite interesting to watch.
When I watched him in the match, the parts where he actually wrestled, he did the spots, they were entertaining, they were clearly skillful. And if the hands in the pockets thing was a one-off during every match where he just, was ripping the piss, then that would be fine. But it just, as you say, it's overdone and it just puts me off a little bit. But certainly I would have thought future title holder, and if he gets this in the match, it would definitely be him or the mystery competitor.
Okay, so I'm going with the mystery competitor. You do see some value in that being the person who wins, but you're going with Orange Cassidy based on the people that you know that are in the match.
Yeah.
Right, okay, so Matt Hardy and the Elite, which you obviously talked about the returning Young Bucks and Adam Page. They are going in against the Inner Circle in the Stadium Stampede, which they've been kind of building up to with some of the more, I don't want to use the word hokey because that sounds like I'm being derogatory, but some of the more light-hearted moments that have come from the stuff that's happened in the stadium. For me, I think the Inner Circle have to win that. I think even though the Young Bucks are returning, you do see Matt Jackson allegedly has a broken rib. I do think that although Matt Hardy is a big character being in there, I don't think he needs to win. I think the Inner Circle, to build that momentum that group needs, they definitely need that win, especially if you look at Jake Hager, Chris Jericho. There is enough there that I think I'm leaning towards the Inner Circle getting that one.
I'm the same as you. I think the Inner Circle need the win. The obnoxious nature of the group needs that win to carry them on and legitimize them. Certainly the level of talent there, like you say, Hager, Jericho, there's no overlooking that. Plus the fact that Guevara just lost, he needs to recoup that and regain some momentum going forward.
Now we move on to the AEW Women's Championship match. Nyla Rose versus Hikaru Shida. I think Hikaru Shida, from the stuff that I've seen, she is very talented. She's good at what she does in that style. I just can't see past Nyla Rose. I don't think they've given the title to Nyla Rose to lose it this quickly. I think the person who beats her has to be built up for quite a long time. And I think it's Dr. Britt Baker who has to beat her. And that's going to be September, October time. It definitely has to be in front of a big crowd. The person who beats Nyla Rose has to be somebody who the fans now want to see win that belt. I don't think that's Hikaru Shida.
I agree. I don't think Shida's getting the belt. Based on the match that we just saw, the thing that frustrated me the most was the fact that Shida kept kicking out of the finishers that Nyla Rose was giving her. Now, by no means in Headlocks and Headphones are we sizist in any way, but someone the sheer size of Nyla Rose, when she is power slamming somebody into the mat, you would think they would not move after that. But yet, Shida instantly gets up, and for me, that's a little disrespectful. I think that really I'd be behind Stadler getting the belt with a little extra work. I can see the
Statlander definitely. The thing with Chris Statlander is there's a gimmick behind it. So she's a decent worker. She's still making mistakes, but she's still quite young. But there's a gimmick behind her. She can talk, and every time she makes mistakes, she can almost hide behind the gimmick. She's an alien, so she doesn't know how things work here. That in itself is really good cover for somebody who's learning. And I don't think she's learned. I don't think she's a new recruit, but she certainly has that chance to plug that gap while she catches up.
I certainly think Statlander and Britt Baker down the line would be a very good matchup to watch. They had some chemistry during the match that I thought worked very well. And there was the whole segment where Britt Baker did not want to go in the ring with the alien. That was the whole reason that Nyla took her by the throat.
I do think sometimes you can almost accuse AEW of throwing too much out there. So it's a criticism that we can easily have towards the Vince Russo era WCW, where they're just putting too much on the air to see what sticks. And I think AEW at this point in time are still kind of guilty of that. But they will find the rhythm. I think having no crowd is harming everybody. Raw is really lacking in direction. SmackDown has been piss poor, to be honest. And it's been that bad, we're not even going to cover it this week. We're not going to cover the SmackDown that just happened. We will start covering it next week. But, I'm so disinterested in SmackDown right now that I could skip it for weeks at a time and not care.
Well, let's face it, we were doing that with an audience anyway.
Yeah, well, sadly. Now, AEW, the TNT Championship. For me, Cody Rhodes versus Lance Archer. This is the match that's the most exciting one on the card. The problem here for me is the fact that Cody Rhodes, within a couple of months of that show starting, they already put him in a match, and if he didn't win it, he'd never get the challenge for the world title. For me, that's a problem. If you want to have somebody in a main event feud, they have to be able to go for the world title.
Certainly, I think so. Part of the
So now into the main event, AEW World Championship, featuring Jon Moxley versus Brodie Lee. Allegedly, the Brodie Lee gimmick is very much an homage to Vince McMahon. And when I say homage, I mean in a slightly offensive way. It's meant to be a dig at Vince. What do you think about the Jon Moxley Brodie Lee stuff? Because I know Jon Moxley faced off against one of the Dark Order underlings. But basically, it's a Power Ranger putty, isn't it?
I kind of covered on the show some of the similarities between Brodie Lee and Seth Rollins. For me, although Brodie Lee says he is not a god, he is a man, it seems more to me as though he is a cult leader with ideas of grandeur. He certainly wants to be a Bray Wyatt, or he wants to be somebody who can lead this group of followers to their deaths, basically.
Now, do you think that the Dark Order as a gimmick has succeeded?
Absolutely not. I think that the Dark Order before were a bit cheap, a bit funny, kind of a filler between the real story. Actually having Brodie Lee there gives them some kind of direction, and it means that they have a shot of maybe picking up a couple of mid-card titles because of his hard work. He puts them into positions where they face off against people they can realistically beat. And for me, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay, so Jon Moxley, does he walk out the pay-per-view with a belt?
Yes, he has to. He's went 2 weeks without it, although he is the actual champion. And they need that match so that they know exactly who is the champion. Because at the moment, Brodie Lee is telling everybody that he's not.
Well, thank you, and hopefully the pay-per-view on Saturday will be a cracker.
I hope so.